So today on the Business Talk Library Show, we're talking about some very important topics for small business owners. The first topic is going to be the decline of major media and what that means for small business owners. We'll also talk about the online sales trends. And we're also going to talk about the rise of the robots and what that means for small business owners. So you definitely want to stay tuned for today's show. So, on today's show, we have a couple of topics that we're going to talk about because one of the things that I realize is that there are a lot of things being talked about and discussed in the news. But the truth of the matter is, none of it is really discussed in a way that's very relevant for small business owners. So, what we're going to do on this new segment of the show is we're going to talk about some major news topics and we're going to break it down for what does that actually mean for small business owners. And so, today's very first topic is going to be about there was an article that I saw that was related to the decline of major media outlets. Because one of the things that we've seen a lot is that major media outlets have been really struggling over the past year. Now, some of the recent stats that came out from Nielsen are some of your major media outlets, I guess you say the traditional media outlets have been seeing some very serious declines. I mean, from your CNNs to your Fox News to your CNBCs, your MSNBCs. I mean, some of them have been seeing a decline of about 38 to 14%. Now, that is huge for major media outlets. And a lot of that from if you read any opinions or you read any updates, a lot of that has to do with, in 2020, a lot of these major outlets, they really, really focused in on election and political news. And you know what? That was a very, very big deal in 2020. I mean, with an election coming up, with Donald Trump in office, there were a lot of people who really, really cared and really wanted to focus on what was going on with that. Then coming in, I guess as, 2020 kind of wrapped up going into 2021, when you started looking and saying, you know what? A lot of people started to lose interest in the political conversation, or they weren't as interested in tuning into the political conversation, or they started finding other outlets for them to actually get whatever information that they wanted. Now, one of the other things that became very, very apparent is a lot of the major media outlets became more and more obvious about what their personal opinion or what the personal opinion of the, I guess you say, the anchor or the host of these shows, what their personal opinions were. And what that started to do is people started to realize, hey, you know what? I'm not a big fan of the way that Fox News does this. I'm not a big fan of the way CNN or MSNBC does this, or I'm not a big fan of the way they cover the story. So people started to find their channel, or people started to find, hey, what do I care about? And then even in that, some people were just like, you know what? Maybe this news station has gone a little bit further than I really care. Maybe, you know what, they're a little too far to the left or far to the right. Whatever the case is, we have seen a major decline of major media outlets. Now, the question that we find ourselves asking, okay, all right, what does that even mean for small business owners? Well, the great thing for small business owners is it really changes the landscape on how we think about small business and getting your small business out there. Because the way the traditional media used to work is that the traditional media outlets were the gatekeepers of whose message could be heard. I mean, if you think back to when we had radio, the major media or the major radio companies, they controlled whose message got out there. Then we moved into television, and all of the eyeballs were on these major media networks, and they controlled whose message got out there. Now that we're in this age where people can get the information that they desire from any place, whether they go online, whether they go to social media, people can get the information wherever they like. Even shows like this, where people go to podcasts, people go to YouTube, they go to find their information where they want to. So what does that mean for small business owners? It means small business owners are no longer held captive by or subject to the decisions of major media, meaning small businesses have more options of how they get their message out. Now, another thing this becomes a very clear is that something that major media outlets learn is that there's no way that we can overcome human nature. I mean, when you think about it, human nature is to start to categorize things. I mean, because it's how we make sense of the world around us, is we start to put things in categories, or we start to put things in buckets. Well, when you're building a business, one of the very clear things that we have to really understand is that, our audience or our potential audience is constantly looking at us, trying to put us in a certain category. So when you are developing your message as a business owner, it's really asking yourselves, like, hey, what image or what reputation am I building for my business or for my company? I mean, one of the big things that have come out, I've seen more videos about this or more memes about this in over the past couple years, is when you see those memes about, like, the customer service experience you get at Popeyes versus the customer service experience you get at Chick-fil-A. One of the things that they've realized is that, people and our customers are constantly trying to categorize and put us into a category to understand what is the experience going to be like when I do business with you. So as a small business owner, one of the things we can start to think about is, what is the reputation that we are building with the audience or the potential audience that we could have? How are people thinking about what is it like to really do business with us? And as you start to think about that, one of the things we realize is that as you start to build your audience, the audience that connects with you or the audience that relates to you and your message, one of the very clear things that comes is that, this audience is going to be the audience that you lean more into. And that is something that we've seen with major media outlets, is as they have made it very clear on what their stance or their message is, they've leaned more and more heavily into that, because it is something that draws us as human nature is. We tend to lean more into who our audience is. There was a journalist that I heard, I believe his name was Tom Rosenstall. One of the things that I heard him say is, over time, it's almost like you become captive to the audience that you have built. And that is very true when it comes down to business ownership. Is as you think about the audience that you are building, one of the questions that you have to ask yourself as a business owner is this the right type of audience that I desire? Now, that's something that we've had to ask ourselves at the TL Turner Group, is constantly, is as we started serving different clients, and what industries do we serve well? I mean, it's one of the reasons why we came back and said, law firms, restaurants, and marketing agencies, and those are the industries that we serve well, because we were the best fit for those. Now, when we started off, we were trying to serve everybody, and that just never works as a small business. So one of the big lessons that you can learn as a small business from the major news stories is that be very mindful of the audience that you build, because that is the audience that you're going to have to lean into more. And you ask yourselves, hey, if I take a look at my customers, the people who do business with me, are those the type of people that I really want to serve long term? Because as people get more options, what you'll find is you're going to have to lean more into your audience. Now, the second top story is, as we're going through the holiday season, one of the things that we dramatically, or I guess we expect to happen, is that retail sales will go up. Well, what we have definitely seen as a result of the pandemic, plus, just people's preference, and plus just I think an overall technology shift, we've seen more and more money shifting to online sales. And online sales continue to rise, and there does not seem to be a slowing of this trend. I mean, across any industry across the board, you're starting to see more and more online sales rise. So, for a small business owner, the question that you find yourself asking is, okay, what does this mean for me as a small business owner? Well, there are a couple of things that this means. The first thing it means is that you have to have an online presence. If you are a small business and you do not have an online presence, this environment that we are moving into will dramatically have a negative effect on your business because business is becoming way more online and it is becoming way more not only just online where it's just static, but it's becoming more interactive online where you see things where you can go to a person's website and you can chat with a person, or most of the time you're chatting with a robot, but there's this chat feature that you can ask questions when people show up on your website. Is it searchable? Can I search for what it is that I want? Or is it easy for me to navigate your website? So, as a small business owner, one of the things that you have to really start to think about is as you look at your online presence, is how easy is it for people to navigate and find what they are looking for? Because one of the biggest challenges you can run into when you're having a online presence or as you're taking your business more online is if it becomes too difficult for people to find what they're looking for, they will leave. I mean, think about it this way is let's say if you had a physical store and let's say if people came in, they were looking for, let's say if you had a clothing store, people were looking for a certain style of clothes. Let's say they were looking for the women's section. And let's say if as they came into the store, the women's section was a little bit over here, was a little bit over there. And then the things that they really wanted, like whether it's shoes or coats or jackets, it was somewhere in the back hidden in the corner or something. Well, most people who would come into that store, they'd probably look at that store and say, you know what? This is an absolute mess. Like, there's no way I'm going to work this hard to give this store my money. And the same thing happens with your online presence. If you are a small business, when you think about how easy is it for you for your customers to shop with you online, if it's not very easy for your customers to do business with you online, you're really going to find yourself really struggling as more business moves to online. Now, the other thing about it is there are a lot of small businesses who have, a service-based product, meaning you can't deliver your service online. Let's say if you're a cleaning company, you can't deliver your cleaning service online. I mean, and there are several other types of businesses where you just can't do it online, or maybe you can do your service online but there's concerns about security and cyber attacks, and which is something that I live myself, and providing accounting and finance support is like you're constantly thinking through, hey, how do we still deliver a great quality product, but we also have to think about the new things that it introduces us to, and those new things may be cybersecurity, they may be accessibility, and just the fact of, just like that, some products is very difficult to almost impossible to deliver. Hey, if you have a lawn care service, it's very difficult to deliver that online. So one of the things that you have to think about is not only are people looking to buy products and services online, but people are also looking for ways of, how do I find you, how do I learn about you online? So businesses, especially small businesses, have to get very intelligent about how they move their attention or how they communicate their message online. And just as we spoke earlier, I mean, one of the things we talked about earlier was that you're going to see a lot of major media companies that are going to see their advertising dollars shift to more online platforms, which means that more of the major companies are going to be making a bigger personal or branding statement on the line, which is why it becomes very important for businesses to start developing their reputation online. Even if you sell a service or you sell a product that's difficult to get online, you want to start making some type of online presence, whether that's social media, whether that's your website, or whether that's some other forum. You want to make sure that you're starting to look at that and take that more seriously. Now, one of the things that we have not seen is we have not seen a shortage of memes when it comes to businesses being short staffed. I mean, if you've watched any social media outlet, you've probably seen all of these memes or you've seen some of these memes. And one of the things that we're constantly seeing as we're working through, all of the concerns about COVID, and we're also working through what the legislation looks like for that. We're also looking through, hey, you know, as far as people, being able to make the wage that they desire. We are seeing, and also with, supply chain constraints, we are seeing a massive shortage across the board in so many industries. And as we're seeing that shortage on the workforce, one of the obvious questions that starts to come up more and more and more, major companies, or I guess you say large companies, are have been asking this question for years. And I work with some of the world's largest companies, and this is one of those discussions that have been very active in the boardrooms and very active with the CEOs and the executives and the leadership team and the engineering teams. But now we are starting to see, because of this massive work shortage and this massive amount of companies that are short staffed, we're starting to see this conversation actually come down to your small businesses. And so the question that's being posed for small businesses more and more is, does the work shortage equal more robots? And because you're starting to see more and more businesses starting to figure out, how do we start to solve our work shortage problem with more technology, or maybe more robots and more computer, more algorithms. And as we're starting to live through a phase, as more business shifts from being in person to being online, the rise of the robots become very, very, very real. Some of the examples that we're starting to see this in is, in your traditional, let's say you go to a bakery, and let's say before you would go to the bakery, you would get to the counter, you talk to the person on the other side of the counter, have a great conversation with them, get some recommendations about what may be good, what's great on the menu, what would they like. But now what we're seeing is, some people are going into their traditional bakeries, and instead of actually talking to a person, what they do is they walk in, they walk up to a tablet or some computer monitor, they pick what they want, the computer tells the kitchen, hey, this is what the person wants, their name pops up, they step up to the counter, and they get their product. Meaning, the dynamic of a bakery is even changing as a result of, robots and technology, to where there used to be that face-to-face personal interaction. But a lot of smaller businesses are starting to leverage technology like this. And the question that you have to ask yourself as a small business is, what place does technology and robotics have in your business model? And also, is your business model designed in a way that will allow you to take advantage of technology where you can? Because one of the things that we are not very sure on, and different people may have opinions about this, but we're not very sure on, is how long the labor shortage may last. We are not very sure on, when the supply chain issues will be resolved. We're not sure on when COVID will subside enough for us to be able to go back to what we may consider to be a normal. And to be honest with you, we're not sure when many companies will be able to hit that the desired wage that employees are looking for. All of these constraints have a unknown factor. So one of the things that small businesses are having to think about more is, how do I leverage technology? How do I leverage algorithms? How do I leverage robotics to actually help me continue to operate my business? Now, a few keys when it comes down to this area is, if you're a business and you're looking to leverage robotics, and you're looking to leverage technology more in your business, you have to take the time to understand, what are the routine operations within your business. And what that means is, what are things that are very repetitive or pretty consistent, or have a consistent process in your business, and ask yourself, hey, have we actually documented what we do in this step? Like, if I had to train someone else to do this instead of me, do I have anything documented about this process? Because one of the things that I've realized in helping some companies when I worked for major corporations and Fortune 500 companies, when we were trying to implement robotics and machine learning, one of the things that we ran into is if we were not able to actually create some type of process around this, if we weren't able to create that process, then it was very difficult for the engineers to program anything around it. So, what we had to do is we had to take a step back and ask ourselves, hey, how do we actually create a pretty consistent or a pretty smooth process for this? And as we were able to create a process for it, one of the things that it allowed us to do is to work with the engineers, work with the software engineers, and start to create and I guess you say a technology enabled process. So, as a small business owner, one of the things that we definitely have to do is take a step back and say, okay, all right, how are we going to be able to create processes that are consistent that we can then use technology to aid in those processes. Also, one of the things to really keep in mind is as more business moves online, one of the great things that does for a lot of small businesses that didn't have the ability before is it gets you access to more data. As we go back to even the first point, as major media outlets are declining, one of the things that this also introduces us to is online, you're able to collect more data and more information about your customers to understand what are the types of things that they like. You know, you're able to start to see trends. Some of the things that I've done with some of our customers is as we really started to look at their data, one of the things that we realized is, with one bakery I was working with, we started looking at the data. And something that became very obvious as I looked at the data is people tend to like chocolate chip cookies on Thursdays. Now, we had no idea why, but the data was just telling us people tend to buy chocolate chip cookies more on Thursdays. So, why not use that information to say, hey, if people are buying more chocolate chip cookies on Thursdays, why don't we just run a special on chocolate chip cookies? Or why don't we just make sure that we have enough ingredients to make the chocolate chip cookies, because Thursdays seem to be a big day that people are loving chocolate chip cookies. We also looked and saw that, hey, there are certain days of the week that people prefer to buy donuts. And at one point, we were trying to do donuts every single day. And we said, hey, if people are really buying it on these 3 days of the week, why not just focus in on that? That way, we can give our staff a little bit of a break on those other days, because to make great donuts, you got to show up early and there's a process involved. So why not just focus it on to a certain day when the customers are really showing up for it? And all of that came down to this. It's really looking and understanding the data and the trends. So there you have it. Three top stories that are going on of, the decline of major media. Nielsen just released many reports on showing that less people are paying attention to the major media outlets and they're shifting their attention. The question is, where are they shifting their attention to? Now, for small business owners, if less people are watching major media news outlets, what that probably means is they're either shifting their attention to on-demand content like your Netflix, your Hulu, your Amazon Prime, your Apple TVs, your Peacocks, whatever the platform is. Or they could be shifting their attention to just online content where they're deciding to get their news by searching for it online. Or maybe they're shifting their attention to social media. One of the things that allows you as a small business owner to do is it now allows you not to be held captive by the major media networks, because being able to advertise your business on all of those alternative platforms is a lot cheaper than it was to advertise it on major media networks. So that creates a tremendous opportunity for you. The other thing is online sales are continuing to increase and there's no slowing of online sales. So if you're a small business owner, the first thing you need to do is get a presence online. You need to exist online and also look at making it easier for people to find you online And then three is you got to get your products online. Whatever your product is, even if you're a service-based business, how do you create an online version of your product so that you can still be able to grow your business, because online sales are not slowing down? And then number three is, as we are all facing the job shortage and there's a labor shortage going on across the world, the question that we ask ourselves is, are robots the answer to solving some of the labor shortage problem? For major businesses like Fortune 500 businesses, they've been asking this question and actually trying to work towards that for years. Now, this pressure of labor shortage is hitting our small businesses more than ever before. So, small businesses are asking themselves, how can we position ourselves to be more, I guess, ready to leverage technology to be able to survive and to continue thriving as a small business? So, thanks again for tuning into the Business Talk Library. We will be back every opportunity that we can to share more insight, because one of the things we've realized is that, you know what, you hear a lot about the news or what's going on in major companies, but very few people are breaking it down to explain, what does this mean for our small businesses? So definitely, thanks for tuning in.